All right, it's time to get our fish flop on, and not just any fish flop. We are looking at the dreaded reverse fish flop, something that has struck fear in many the pole dancer and floor work enthusiast. So we are going to look at ways to desensitize the scary elements of it, so you can actually really enjoy the element of falling into the floor. So see it like a team building exercise of sorts, except your team is the floor. We're also going to implement things like cushions and other things to make us feel comfortable through this movement. So I want you to pop your knee pads on, preferably closed toe boots. And if you've got something like a cushion from your couch or some thick matting that you can use to protect your important bits while you refine some of these dynamics, that would be a great start. So let's just quickly do a few drills to get us in the flow for fish flop land. We are going to start in our cat position, and we are going to go through happy to angry cat, happy to angry cat. Now on this last happy, I want you to stick here with your tailbone out and your chest pulled forward. As we now take the hips back to the heels, we're going to thrust the pelvis forward and then lift it as we come back. We go angry cat, stretching through the back. Happy cat, sitting all the way to the heels. Let's do a couple more like this. And on the next one, we are going to release our hands as we come back. So we're going happy cat tail, and then we're going to drift up through angry cat, and then come back down. Happy cat, angry cat, and happy cat, angry cat, and happy cat. Let's now do one more. Angry cat to happy cat. And now this time, as we come into our angry cat, we're going to open up into our happy cat arc. So I want you to really thrust your hips forward and squeeze those glutes as we open up the chest and look back. Let's now go angry. We lift the pelvis as we come back, we tuck it, and we come all the way up into our body wave, chest open and curling back down. Happy cat tail as we reverse it, tucking the pelvis, opening up like a flower, and then curling back. Last time, we tuck the pelvis, then opening and peeling the chest, and then recurl. All right. So, from our introduction to our fish flops, there's some important mechanics to come to terms with before we start moving and flipping around. And that is, science tells us that round things roll and flat things splat. So you don't want to be the flat thing, you want to be the round thing for this exercise. So we're just going to practice making the shape that we want when we actually drop into reverse fish flop. So that means tucking the pelvis, pushing the hips forward and letting those shoulders come back, so we create an arc with the front of our body. So we really want to use those glutes. We can even hold this position by holding onto the backs of our heels there and have a little stretch through there. This is the kind of position we want to utilize when we are rolling down towards the floor. If we were to close down those hips and let the hips point out, what will happen is we will belly flop the floor. And we don't want that. We want a nice rolling sensation so that there's no kind of uncomfortable pressure as we land. So what we're going to do first is try that, test out our scientific theory through our cobra position. So in cobra, we're just going to create a little bit of a rock, and I want you to kick your feet towards your head as you rock into your chest with your chin lifted forward. And then return to your cobra. Let's try that again. We are kicking towards the head as we allow the arms to control the descent into the ground and then come back. So with momentum, we're kicking and lifting through the chest. So we want to get comfortable taking weight into the hands, and we definitely don't want to have that kind of feeling of hitting the brakes as our hands connect with the floor when we come into our reverse fish flop. So this is just a good way to get that push-up action happening so that when we do the full thing, we're creating that controlled lower through the hands. Can we see how that is the bigger version of what we're doing here in our Cobra rocking? So I want you to really give it a bit of force and power to see how big you can get those rocks up before we start this from knees. So let's try a few more together. We are lifting the chin away as we go chest first towards the ground. Kick and extend, kick and extend. And you'll notice, as long as you're lifting your chin away, we shouldn't actually be headbutting the floor. So I want you to keep that in mind as well. When we start doing the bigger version, know that you will be safe as long as you are not looking where you were going, because a head down moment means a forward pound into the floor. So we want to lift away, lengthening through the chin no matter what. Let's try that. Tucking the pelvis and lifting the chin away as we kick and extend. Kick and extend. Can we get a bit higher on the chest and extend? Well done. Pushing back. Okay, so that was a lot easier than maybe what we had anticipated. So let's see what happens when we add a bit of height. So the good thing is, when we've got height, it means we've got a lot more falling momentum that we can utilize to make this skill bigger. So hypothetically, it should be easier as long as we follow the correct shapes in the correct order. So let's look at that together. All right, so if this is your first time ever doing the reverse fish flop, it's not a bad idea just to have some cushion there to kind of make you feel more at ease. So it's more for up here than it is for down here, but it's nice to know that it's there just in case while we get the hang of things. So we want to try and position this so that it's going to line up with the pelvis. So we've got at least our, our important bits protected. So we're going to create that same setup position that we were looking at before, where we're tucking the pelvis under and then thrusting the hips forward with the shoulders back. So I want you to take a moment with your chin lifted back. We're going to try and look behind us and get those hands ready into push-up position. So what this will mean, with a bent elbow, we're trying to create a little bit of a spring action as we take the weight into the hands. So your first drill will be this. We're here, we're looking just down the bridge of our nose, but keeping our chin lifted, yeah? So we can kind of gauge a little bit where the floor is without doing this. And we're going hands into the floor and back. Let's try that again. Lifting away with the chin, still looking down the bridge of the nose, pushing those hips forward, squeezing the glutes, and getting ready to gauge where that floor is. We take and absorb that impact into the hands. Make sure you do not bitch slap the floor. That is not the purpose of the hands. They are your shock absorbers. So we want to let the chest make contact with the floor by letting the arms control that part of the descent. So I want you to keep going with this drill until you really feel consistency through it. And that means getting used to finding out where that floor is in contrast to how quickly you fall with gravity. Let's go a few more times. Head back, hips forward, pushing the toes into the ground. We slink hips first. And press and push. If you're feeling really good and you think that it's more of an obstruction now to have that mat, I want you to get rid of it and see how you feel with your falling variation. Remembering that it's all in the hips. So as long as those hips are pushed forward, we're going to have a nice round surface to rock like a rocking horse. Let's go. Looking down the bridge of the nose only, and we reach for the ground with a bent elbow and pushing. Well done. When you're ready to move on, we're going to look at the kick up moment into our fish flop kick. So for every action, there is a reaction. So everything is about science when we're talking acrobatics, because we're using things like momentum. So when we fall with gravity and we take that weight into our chest, as we start to naturally come back, we're able to also use that power and take it upwards. And when we do that, it's going to buy us some time to tuck in our toes. And that version looks like this. So, almost like a gigantic worm, I've fallen hips first. As my hands start to do their shock absorption and they reach their full bent position, I then repel the floor and take my power upwards. When my hips are high, I then have the time to be able to tuck those toes under and then bend the knees to land. So the first drill for this is just going to be your toe slam, which looks like this. So once we take the weight to the chest, we are tucking the toes right underneath us. And it's not much of a difference to just soften through those knees to land. But I do want you to get into the habit now of always landing toes first when we're doing anything kip related, as it will save your knees. You only get one set unless you want a double reconstruction. So let's look after those knees. Let's try that again. We're going to go squeezing those toes down into the floor after we shoot up. Remembering, toes need to be as close to the body as possible so that we don't feel heavy through those legs. Hands ready, chin back, looking down through the bridge of the nose if you still need to. As we thrust hips first, we then shoot toes over and down, bending through the knees to come up. When that's starting to get a good flow to it, we're going to connect the dots, which means as we push out of the floor with the hands, we're actually going to see if we can get that tiny little bit of air time. So it's like you're doing an explosive push-up out of the floor to land straight toes, knees. Looks like this. Yeah, so we're throwing the floor away rather than staying grounded as those toes land. So there's one more little variation for you to play with now. And when you get really comfortable and confident with this, you are going to get to the stage where you don't really need to have those hands in front ready to catch, and you can be a little bit more subtle with how you descend. So for instance, if we don't want to make it obvious that we're about to do a reverse fish flop, we could do something else with the hands. So as we come back into those happy cat tails and we're peeling ourselves up, we can do something with the arms and then come into our reverse fish flop. So it just means that we can make it a little bit dancier and we're not kind of going, look, I'm about to do a reverse fish flop, which kind of is a bit of a spoiler. So eventually we want to try and take those little crutches away and get used to the timing of the catch so that we can delay that hand position. So whatever you want to do, we're kind of creating that time in the air where it looks like we're kind of floating. And then hands scooch in just at the last minute, barely even noticing it happened. Yeah? Almost like a sleight of hand, really quick. You don't even notice the hands are actually in push-up position because they so fast. So that is your OG variation of the reverse fish flop to kip. This is your primary starting point for all of those other exit variations, which could be your drop split as well. And that guy looks like this. but they all follow that same train. So whether you are going knees or you are opening up to a split, we must have that upward stretch before we take those legs into their final resting position. So focusing on what happens in the middle is going to be key to having a great exit. Let me show you that one from the back view. Let me show you that one from the back view. So although I've got hips up, as I slide down into the drop split, I'm really squeezing through the toes and knees so I can control the slide down. And right at the last moment, as I feel the hips start to connect with the ground, that's when we're throwing the chest open and flicking the hair back to create a little bit more pop in that final moment of the pose. It just looks a little bit more dynamic than just landing here. We want here. Yeah, so it's almost like a counter action. So we can practice that. Hips up, flick, hips up, flick, until it becomes part of our muscle memory and it feels natural for us to open up as we slide down into those fake split lines. So that is the reverse fish flop and how you can make it your bitch. Once you do make it your bitch, it does mean that we can open up a new world of possibilities, including things like our reverse fish flop over to kip exit, which is something you're going to see demonstrated in my latest exotic generation routine. So yes, I will definitely be covering that in a future tutorial. But until next time, take care of yourself.